And so when with the sign of Jonah, the word of the Lord came to him and he ran away. When the word of the Lord comes to you, what do you guys think? I always think that there's a voice that says blah 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 blah, and they're like, oh, and like they had like this human relationship. But now with my expanded mind, I know that the word of the Lord is when that Jonah had known what was said, by prior prophets, or the historical biblical almanac, the Old Testament. He knew what was said, and because he knew what was said, he was aware. And when those things started happening, the word of the Lord came to him. He was in awareness, and in that awareness, he was able to see that Nineveh, that's where that awareness was leading him. The eye of God, the voice of God, the ear of God was telling him, oh, you are aware. You need to go over there and tell these people, because they have come up to me, like they have come into my vision and my alertness, because they are a wicked nation, right? But Nineveh was also a really great nation. It took like 3 days to get through it, But instead, Jonah up and left, and he was trying to run away, right? And then on 1:5, he says, fell into a deep sleep. So he was on that ship going to the port that he was running away from, or running away from Nineveh to. And there was a big storm, but even in that storm, he was down in the depths of the boat, falling asleep, while everyone who was on the top was like trying to throw stuff out and like trying to calm the storm, and they were all scared. So they figured that all out, and as we know, Jonah got thrown into the ocean. And then on Jonah 1:17, the great fish came and swallowed him up. A beast of the ocean, of the depths, came up and swallowed him up. So not only was Jonah in the depths of the ocean where it's really dark, but something else, something alive, something that is that lives down there, that is mythologized, but at the same time is very true, came and put him in even a greater darkness within its darkness, within the darkness of the ocean, which will, if you go to the surface of the ocean, you get the light, right? So Jonah was like 2-3 times deep inside of this darkness. And while he was there for 3 days, 3 nights, right? And so he prayed and he repented, because he knew what he had done. The word of the Lord came to him first. So he knew what the voice of God, he knew about what signs to do, and he knew the reasons why he was doing that. So that little bit of awareness got him out, and that beast spit him out into where he had to go. But then it says on Jonah chapter 3, this is the second time the word of the Lord came to him, right? And then Nineveh was this great 3-day city, but Jonah preached. Nineveh heard his words, they believed in God, and they repented. And in the repentance, God is a God of compassion. Compassion is a very powerful way to alleviate any type of friction. Compassion, I'll have another talk on that, about explaining about that type of energy, right? But ultimately, Jonah accomplished what God wanted, and Nineveh was saved, right? But then we read in chapter 4, Jonah was angry to the point that he wanted to die, and which is really awesome, because in correlation, Matthew chapter 26, verse 32, when Jesus was praying right before he was taken by the guards, it said that he was in sorrow to the point of dying, and then he was praying and blood came out in his pores. But that's what Jonah was angry, where Jesus was sorrowful, but both had this feeling of they wanted to leave, right? They wanted to die. They were going to die. So then Jonah was saying, I knew you were a God of compassion, so that's why I ran away. So obviously, Jonah had a vendetta against Nineveh. And then he said, he went and sat in the east, and God grew a vine to shade him, which Jonah was happy. And then God sent a worm, a little parasite, to eat that vine, which then withered. And Jonah was sad and wanted to die again. And God said, do you have a right to be angry? And Jonah said, yes. And he said, okay, so you have been concerned about this, but you didn't do any work to do it. But I'm God, I've done everything. Should I not be concerned of this great city? But on the opposite side of this, you have to understand too, do you have any right to be angry at the vine? No, you really don't. But do you have a right to be happy about the vine? No, you really don't. So it is really a blessing, both ends of the spectrum. And the fact that it withered, right? So in the Bible prophecies of Matthew chapter 24, right? God, one of the commands at the end of that, the whole, when Jesus was foretelling the future about all that stuff, he said, know this about the fig tree, right? The fig tree. And when he said that, you think about what Jesus was or did to his fig tree that one time. He was hungry. He went up to a fig tree that had leaves but no fruit. And so Jesus got hangry and was like, may you never produce fruit again. And the fig tree withered, right? Because there was no fruit. In the end in Jonah, that vine that grew up, it withered because of that little worm. The little worm is that you haven't been complete in your virtuous task. You haven't fulfilled your oath. There was nothing there at the end. Even though you did the will of God, that is not the end. It still ends with you, yourself. And there was no fruit on the fig tree for Jesus. That withered. Never again, right? With Jonah, he was angry that they were saved and God was able to be compassionate. So he didn't learn compassion. Then, his fig tree withered, and there's nothing that you can be happy or sad about. What you have to do is just be humble. You need to be humble because humility is always going to be the ground for your seed to be planted. Humility comes from a word called humus. Humus comes from a word meaning soil. That's why when the Nile flooded, it brought a whole bunch of really good humus into the fertile crescent. And that's what people were looking for. But before it could be fertile, there had to have been a little bit of overwhelming disaster looking things, like a flooding of the Nile, right? And so humility is a mother virtue. And that always, whenever you are incomplete on your own concerns, you always, if you can drop back down to humility, then you can maintain your honor. Humility must come before honor, right? And honor is for those who are worthy to wear a crown of righteousness, because it's not that, you're not good enough or you're not bad enough, but you have to be mature in spirit enough in order to, for them to know that you have been approved. When you're approved, that's when you know that you are worthy to do this. Because a king who wears a crown knows that a crown is a very heavy burden, right? It's a heavy burden that not just a regular person or just a common person or even just a lord or anything like that can maintain. And so a king is able to wear a crown knowing it's a heavy burden because he has the strength and fortitude in order to bear that burden and not die, pretty much, right? And not cause his whole kingdom to collapse. And so you have to understand that it's not about, you're not worthy and you're not worthy. It's you need to prove that you have a high standard of a virtuous law, abiding with a moral and an ethic, a maturity of spirit, so that when the whole end comes about and the new beginning comes about, so we're living in a kingdom, the king, Jesus Christ, who's going to be the king of the new heaven, right? Via the oath and trust promise he made to his father, the emperor, or the name above all names, he doesn't want to have to stand there and decree the rules again. This is the concept of living in a place where there is all chiefs and no Indians. Because if you think about it, if you have all chiefs, no longer do you even have chiefs or Indians. You have something completely new, that everyone in their common sense of how they live every day is at such a high standard of rules that are saturated in virtues, and those virtues have no rules on them. Does that make sense? The more that you put rules on a virtue, the more that you turn from a kingdom to a rulership, to a dictatorship, to a tyranny. And that is a kingdom divided upon itself. That is not a freedom. That is imprisonment, you know? And so the more that you have to dictate rules to people, the more they're going to not want to listen to you, actually, and do their own thing. The more that you cinch people together, the more the rebellious they get. Think about it. The more that when you're growing up, the more that you have rules on you, the more that, one, you don't like the house that you live in, and two, you want to try to break out of that because you're a free spirit. That's who you are. You are a spirit. You are eternal spirit living in a human experience, you know? And so you have eternity within you in a very mortal, in a very mortal being. So you're bringing eternity into time and allowing eternity to recognize time. And that right there is almost like a what's it called? Like an oxymoron. It's almost like a koan, a riddle, but it works right now, right? And that's why if you can figure out the answer to that riddle, you can be a physical type of time, like, you know, a man body, immortal, but your eternal spirit, once approved, will amalgamate in your body, and that's how you become an immortal being, a real human being. And so that's why, right? And then the fig tree, when Jesus comes to you as someone who has asked to be in this trust and has not done your part, there will be no fruit. And so what good are you, right? It's like, I was hungry, and then, like, how come you're showing me all the signs that you're ripe? You got the leaves, right? But where are your fruit? And so, he turns away from you, right? You haven't accomplished yourself enough. And so you wither. But that's okay because the soil is there. That's why you have your roots under the ground. No matter what happens on the top of the plant, if the roots in the soil, if the soil can have the correct type of fertilization and maintain its composure and the humility, right? The roots will still get nutrition and you can start over no matter how much you've withered. There is still hope. There's still life. Does that make sense? And you can still come up to the light of day. You just have to be, now this time, a lot more aware, conscious of what you're trying to do, and reflect back on what happened again and again that made you not go forward, right? And so that happened. And then when it says the sign of Jonah, right? The Pharisees, the church, the Pharisees, Sadducees, and Sanhedrin wanted a sign from Jesus, saying that if he was this, then show us this. And he said, idolatrous and treacherous generation, you ask for a sign, but won't get any except one, that the sign of Jonah. And then he went on to proclaim what he was going to do with 3 days and 3 nights, right? The crucifixion and the resurrection by the glory of God the Father, which happened. But that's still where we are. Remember, the New Testament is the testimony of Jesus Christ, the testament of Jesus Christ. And the Spirit of Jesus Christ is the spirit of prophecy, right? And so that right there is for us to know still that it holds true today, that that this beast is still going to be here at that time when the beast comes to swallow a lot of people. And that's the cognitive dissonance. And the son of Jonah, which is also, a son is also known as a sign of your father. It's a signet, right? A signet ring. That's what the king has on top of his hand when he does anything, and then he stamps his approval, right? That is a signet ring. That's why Jesus Christ, the Son of God, is at the right hand of his Father. He is the seal, the brand on you, so his Father knows that you are of his kingdom, his children, right? And so the son of Jonah is Simon Peter, who Jesus Christ, or Jesus of Nazareth, he gave him the keys to heaven, and whatever was bound in heaven was bound on earth, and it's vice versa for Simon Peter, the son of Jonah, right? And Matthew 16:17 it says, "Blessed are you, Simon Peter, son of Jonah." So Matthew 26:70, this is when he denied Christ, and Christ has told him, like, because, okay, so my other video, I remember saying, man, like, if I had this thought back then, and I would, like, maybe he might not have been crucified, because I would have cut everybody